Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting. I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I'm Maui Lives Matter in St. Petersburg, Russia.
All right, well, this is Texting Season 3, Episode 18, and our topic will not be revealed until later. Let's explain why. Originally, we thought our text would be... That's your cue.
Stankonia, yes sir. Stankonia, the 1999 or 2003, one of the two, I'm guessing, epic Outcast album. And it was meant to coincide with my trip to Georgia, aka country south of the Russian Federation. But
and that's so appropriate because Outcast is from the ATL in the state of Georgia. The dirty South.
Absolutely.
And Georgia is the dirty South from Russia's perspective too, right?
Arguably, yeah, that's a contentious.
So how was that trip?
Fantastic.
I love their script, by the way. Isn't that a beautiful writing system they have?
Yes, and if you were in Russia, I could have brought you back a bookmark with the alphabet. It's a gift that I gave to a couple of my colleagues.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, well, our texting listeners can, of course, listen to the podcast that I created in honor of my trip to Georgia. So that's on my Substack.
Show notes.
Substack, all that. Yeah, in a nutshell, very impressed with the country, clearly developed and hysterically passionate to get into Europe. Many of the younger generation are feeling dispirited at the moment because the most recent election went in the direction of the slightly more pro-Russian party. Something interesting is that one of the billboards that was heavily featured by the more pro-Russia party had two pictures side by side. One with like a cathedral in very good condition, and right next to it was a bombed out cathedral. And these images were taken from the Ukraine. So it's a pretty depressing way of going about a marketing campaign, getting people to vote for you. So, you'd hope that they wouldn't have to just run on fear of the northern neighbor. At times I found aspects of the pro-Western views to be slightly cringe, especially when they were like wetting themselves over NATO in some of the neighborhood graffiti, or even seeming like quite pro-Israel. But at the same time, I do understand the majority of Tbilisi, for example's desire to join the EU. I mean,
is that where you were mostly?
Yeah, mostly in Tbilisi. I mean, and if we just
that's
look
the
factually,
capital, right?
Yeah, and you can see it there on your map. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you look statistically, the EU has been incredibly helpful financially for many countries, including a country that I know well, Poland. So it's hard for me to, strongly disagree with that sentiment. I guess I would say I'm mostly agnostic. Anyway, to hear more, of course, you can tune into the podcast, but absolutely recommend it. And a fierce culture, a passionate culture with an incredible cuisine. So it's actually like arguably the number one cuisine in Russia is Georgian food. So I would compare it to like the place that Mexican food has for Americans or Indian food has for Brits. So it's like a real staple here. On almost every corner you can find a Georgian restaurant. So they've definitely mastered their food, also a very rich winemaking culture, which you may know. And I managed to visit a vinery. Vinery or winery? Can you tell me?
Winery,
A winery.
vineyard,
Vineyard.
vineyard or
Yes.
winery. Yeah.
Yeah, so got to taste some good wine, saw some badass local dancing. I love the music and the dancing of the Georgian traditional folk culture. Uh, and I think the last thing I'll briefly mention is, I think I told you this, but we visited the prominent modern art museum in Tbilisi, and just to give you an idea of how hyper politicized Georgia is, the Wi-Fi password was Abkhazia equals Georgia. So this is just like a a non-political, whatever, secular museum, and you have to imagine that every single tourist who just wants to get onto the Wi-Fi, half of which are probably Russian, have to be typing this into their phone. So yeah, that's
What does that
gets
mean? Explain to us what that means.
sure. Well, in the map that you've pictured,
Yeah.
we see Abkhazia in the northwest, um,
Ah,
and this is a territory that Georgia and Russia went to war over in 2008.
I see.
So
Yes. Along with South Ossetia, right?
right. So you know, there's no love lost, despite huge numbers of Russians currently living in Georgia because of the war. Mainly like males in their 20s, and
It's their Canada. You can draft dodge by
yeah,
going to Georgia. Yeah.
and any Russian is allowed to enter for up to a year without a visa. So you can, and then after the year, you can just pop out and come back in. And this pisses some people off. Anyway, we can have a discussion about Georgia some other time, unless you have any other like outstanding questions. But if you do end up here, Mark, I'm sure you will make a pilgrimage of your own to this fine Caucasian nation.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I do have a lot more questions, but since this is not our topic, sorry. Now, why did you decide not to go through with this? I'd been listening to Miss Jackson and So Fresh, So Clean and Bombs Over Baghdad. What happened? Why'd we not do this?
I would still consider reconsidering, so we can revisit it. I just didn't have the free time, to be honest, to give it a proper listen. Like I want to do it justice, essentially, and I want to do
Okay,
like track by track notes and so on.
sure. Maybe season 4. All right, then
Perhaps.
we also considered the brand new Kendrick Lamar. I nixed that one because I didn't have time to listen. So sorry,
Eh,
Kendrick. Maybe
yeah.
another time. But let's see. Here we go. Yeah, then you said, how about a painting by Gauguin? Just out of the blue, you called this audible. Now, what made you consider this as a possibility?
Sure. Well, as you know, I've been working with a colleague of mine, a Russian woman in her early 20s named Daria. We've been doing a little lecture series locally at a place called New Holland Island. And the overarching theme for our 4 discussion lecture things has been travel. So in our first episode, we looked at different poems. In the most recent one, we looked at excerpts from Into the Wild, from Thoreau, and even Eckhart Tolle. So that was the prose section. And we take turns, just like in texting, selecting the texts. So she's in charge of the one that we'll be presenting on in a week's time, and she's going to be featuring Gauguin's paintings most prominently. So as I'm prepping, I just thought it would be interesting to talk to you. And thanks again, by the way, for helping me with the previous lecture. You gave me some really helpful feedback on my presentation. So once I floated the idea to you, it seems like you had your own kind of history with Gauguin, which was a nice coincidence. So
Which
why don't
is
you tell
why I
me
said, check.
exactly?
So, okay, then it became a question of which painting should we focus on. And you sent me this lovely Tahitian landscape. What's the date on that? It's kind of small on my
1891.
screen. Okay. Well, then I had to suggest this epic creation from 1897, 1898, a few years before. Maybe his most famous painting. It's called Where Do We Come From? What Are We? Where Are We Going? It's an oil painting on canvas, 139 centimeters by 375 centimeters, which doesn't mean much to me. 55 inches by 148 inches.
Okay, so that's
That's pretty
about
big.
5 feet. Yeah, 5 feet wide. So even bigger than my screen. And then, yeah, considerably more than that. What? So 6 feet is 72 inches. So it's about 13 feet or so high. Yeah, so
Yeah,
this is a huge canvas.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, why did I pick this? Well, for reasons of shameless self promotion.
We need another green check here.
Yeah. Actually, this painting inspired a song of mine called Rondo Polynésien, which is featured on my musical project Eyes album No Cure for the Princess Disease, and the remix of that album called No Cure for the Princess Disease or its mutant viral strains. So the chorus, I guess you could say, of the song
This is by Cotton Eye Joe, correct?
alludes I don't know what that
Did
means.
you get where do you come from? Where do you go? Where do you come from, Cotton Eye Joe?
Oh, okay, right.
Sorry.
Add some fiddle. All right. Well, anyway, the chorus of the song, it's actually a rondo, a round. Like there are three parts that are repeated in a kind of loop, but the uh, the part I call part A, let's say, alludes in a very specific way to this painting. The lyrics are, where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? If you think the answers to these questions worth the knowing, leave your wife and family, quit your job, contract amnesia, shack up with a brown-eyed girl on a beach in Polynesia.
Very
Now,
nice.
if you know anything about Gauguin's biographical details, that's pretty much a description of what he did. And I've highlighted the phrase "brown-eyed girl" because that was not the original phrasing. The original said "shack up with a teenage girl on a beach in Polynesia." I actually wrote this when I was in Korea, but before I
The record company
re-recorded,
said no.
well, before I re-recorded it, or then I re-recorded it in Taiwan here, and one of the last mixes had this original version, and I shared it with my writers group. Like I gave them the lyrics, and I had them listen to give me feedback, and I got a lot of negative comments, especially from the females in the group over the phrase teenage girl. And so I thought, well, in this post Epstein age, maybe I should consider changing that. And it actually works quite nicely. Brown Eyed Girl reminds us of Van Morrison. And
It's a little bit less creepy, yeah.
yeah, so just make it more universal than specifically focusing on Gauguin.
Right.
But yeah, you can see in this slide, if you're watching, this is the flag of French Polynesia, and there are the islands of French Polynesia. Polynesia, by the way, means many islands. But yeah, you can see they're like between Australia and South America, pretty much smack dab in the middle of the Pacific Ocean there. So,
I'm, of
any
course,
comment?
immediately thinking about what the journey would be like from France by water, because France is obviously
Right,
not in this particular picture, so
right.
it's got to be quite a
It's a long
distance.
trip. Yeah, yeah. I don't know how he got there. Did he go directly to Polynesia,
I
or
think he flew via Istanbul, like most Russians have to do these days. Ba-da-dum.
I'm sure that's what it was. Yeah. All right, then there's another section just to continue with the shameless self-promotion. I'm just a peacock strutting in pursuit of mystery, and I believe in nothing but a dumbstruck ecstasy. Not much relation to Gauguin, but
It's nice though.
yeah, let's continue. Then that is part B, as I called it, and part C is every man we call a hero started out with less than zero, till he failed his way to glory and his life became a story. And he who is thought wise is he who's come to realize that any fool can see the light if he persists in his own fight. So the less than zero phrase may remind some listeners, viewers of the Elvis Costello song, or the Bret Easton Ellis novel, or the movie based on that novel. So we've got a lot of intertextuality going on here.
Nice.
And this is just the beginning, because
And I like the full light thing. It reminds me of Diogenes. Is that how you pronounce that?
Diogenes,
Yeah.
any
Isn't that
fool
the
can
guy?
see the light. Well, what specifically?
Well, isn't he the guy who lived on the streets of Athens? Or is that someone else?
Oh, and Alexander tried to talk to him, and he said, "Get out of the way! You're
Exactly.
blocking the sunlight," or
He
something
was
like
always
that.
carrying a lamp and claiming to
Yeah,
be looking for an honest man.
yeah, that sounds right. I'm not sure it would have been in Athens, but maybe it was.
Fair enough.
Um,
That's a good
and
point, yeah.
now that I think about it, probably another inspiration for the song was Somerset Maugham's novel about Gauguin, The Moon and Sixpence. Have you ever read that?
No.
It's pretty
How does
good.
it treat Gauguin?
Well, I mean, I don't remember it that well. I think it covers his time in France with Van Gogh, and we'll
Mm.
talk about that later. But
Goch. Isn't
the
it
thing,
Goch?
Van
Or
Gogh,
Hoch?
Van Gogh.
Or isn't it? I feel like I've been hearing, yeah, Hoch. I've been hearing more of like a Hoch recently.
We can
Anyways.
anglicize it. But the thing I remember most, the passage I remember most was the end, right? Like he was estranged. Of course, he did what I say in the song: leave your wife and family. Um, what did I say? Quit your job, contract amnesia. Um, he did leave his wife. He was estranged from her, and we'll talk about what he got into in Polynesia. But um, at the end of his life, all of his paintings. I don't. Where did he die? Did he die in Polynesia, or did he?
I feel like it was somewhere else, but somewhere also very far away.
I know he
Um,
went back and forth. I know he went back and forth. He went to France and then maybe back to Tahiti and then maybe back to France. But whatever, after his death,
died in
like the wife.
Hivawa, which is in
That
French
sounds
Polynesia.
Polynesian. There you go.
It's
So his
but not in
wife
Tahiti.
still. Okay, so his wife, still his legal wife, I don't think they ever divorced. She, demanded that all his paintings, unfinished works, everything that was there be sent back to France, and then she cashed in, right? That's what I remember about the novel. Like she got paid, like she sold off his legacy, and then like
well, to be fair, she did give birth to 5 of his kids. So, little side note,
okay,
little asterisk.
so she earned it. You're saying?
Well, I'm saying, yeah, he does. He should be contributing to the maintenance of the children that he produced.
Well, and that's I guess that's a fair point, because he was, he died penniless, or I guess with sixpence in his pocket. Maybe he died with the moon and sixpence. But I remember it was like an interesting ending to the novel, because she cashed in, and like, though he was ignored during his lifetime, suddenly this style, this garish, colorful, exotic style became very popular throughout Europe, right? So he never lived to see the success of his vision in worldly terms.
Okay, but I mean, we shouldn't overstate it and say that he was like a completely underappreciated artist. I mean, he obviously had many famous associations with important artists. You already mentioned Van Gogh, but I think he also had a close relationship. Was it with Renoir? Or no, I'm getting that wrong, and we'll probably have to edit that out. But he had like keep it. Just
keep the mistakes.
Okay.
We're just texting.
Fair enough. Well, he
put a little asterisk by it.
He had an acquaintance with Pissarro, who was obviously like a massive figure. And I'm sure there was one major artist who he worshipped, and why don't you talk while I search for that?
Well,
Cezanne. Cezanne
okay.
is another major association.
Yeah. You can see the influence of Cezanne in his work. So
my only point being, he was able to like fund his way to Tahiti through his work. But your point is still well taken. Like he wasn't the figure that we know now at all.
Right. Yeah. And he did suffer greatly for his art, physically and spiritually, and in other ways perhaps. But I learned this today. There's also a movie version of The Moon and Sixpence, so that's interesting.
That poster is hilarious.
Yeah, what does it say? I hate love. It interferes with my work, yet I am only human.
I'm only human.
I remember this. I remember this in the novel too. Like that was a theme, an important theme in the novel. Like the flesh interferes with the spirit, but someone confronted him about it. Maybe it was the author himself, or the narrator, right? Who was it? Mom himself? Was it kind of like an autobiographical narrator? I don't remember that, but basically, whoever it was confronted him with this, like, so what do you do about it? Like, isn't it true that every month or so you go off whoring to sate your desires? And then he was like totally silent. That shut him up, because it was true. So he wanted to be a man of the spirit, but he gave in to the temptations of the flesh.
I mean, that's interesting that you're saying that he wanted to be a man of the spirit. I mean, only because I'm sure we'll get into this later, but words that I see commonly associated with him, or words that he aspired to, are like words like savage and primitive. And while there certainly could be a connection between those terms and spirituality, but it also wouldn't preclude any sexual appetite or sexuality. I mean, I think that one of the things he admired about the women in Tahiti, for example, were that they had a lot less hang-ups about sex, were more liberal about having sexual experiences from an earlier age, and so on. But I don't know. I haven't seen the slideshow. I'm enjoying kind of watching you reveal it. No pun
You're
intended.
being surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm stripping
So
off the layers of clothing, bit by bit. Well, the mention of the word savage, of course, makes me think of D.H. Lawrence, right? Who also is a kind of prophet of sexuality. Not a kind of, but maybe one of the most well known prophets of liberated sexuality of the 20th century, Um, and he referred to his wanderings and his artistic endeavors as a savage pilgrimage. So more
yeah,
intertextuality.
I mean, is this something that we're going to get into later? Just
Maybe.
because I think it's very, it's obviously central to contemporary discussions of Gauguin. Not that we need to like
Oh no, yeah,
necessarily.
we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
Okay,
Save that.
okay,
Yeah,
all right.
for sure. Yeah, we're gonna cancel him.
Yes,
Um,
that's the end
yeah,
product of the
let's do it.
podcast.
Yes.
The final word.
And I just realized that I could do some more shameless self promotion, but we'll save that for later. All right, so one other bit of intertextuality. Do you recognize this?
Whoa, this is crazy.
Do you
This is the
recognize
first. Yeah,
this?
I do very much so, and I love this quote. But I never knew until today who or I never connected that with the actual painter Gauguin. I just thought, oh, it's just some guy that Mark reads. So that's a trip. I love
So
that quote
yeah,
though.
this was from I don't know, Co-Reality 6, 5, 4, 8, I don't know. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's one we
I feel like it
for
was
those
early
that don't
on.
know, could have been. For those that don't know, the magazine that Tomek and I published in Korea called Co-Reality, we would always include inspirational or otherwise relevant quotes like at the beginning and the
It's kind of like
end.
Chicken Soup for the Soul, if you're familiar with that.
Oh Lord. Okay. If you say so. Well, but interesting, this is actually feminine. Soyez mystérieuse,
Mm.
or however that's pronounced. So it's specifically addressed to like females. So it's like saying be mysterious, you women, in the plural. But when we translate into English, it's more generalized. Be mysterious. So
Interesting.
yeah. So this is a a kind of what relief
Carving.
carving. Yeah, it's a kind of, I was going to say relief sculpture, relief sculpture, but it's a wood carving. Is painted polychrome lime wood.
Nice.
So yeah, it's now in Paris, but interesting image. It looks like
Yeah,
dream imagery.
I like it.
So yeah, I guess that's enough intertextuality for now. But at this point, I'd like to actually look at the text. Let's engage with the text. Imagine that you've walked into the Museum of Fine Arts Boston and you're confronted with this huge mural, or what looks like a mural because it takes up an entire wall. And I think he tried to make it appear like a fresco. So let's try to recreate that experience. We've gone into the Museum of Fine Arts Boston and we're confronted with this huge oil on canvas. What do we see? What do you see?
But
I'm
what
going
do
to
you
leave that to you.
see? If you remember, that was I think we used that expression in a different podcast because I told you that my my Blake teacher would always start our
Right,
discussions of his.
right.
Yeah.
I think that was during the Kandinsky um,
Yes.
episode, which was season 1 or 2. My, we've been doing this a long time, too
It's
long,
true.
some would argue. But all right, what do you see?
Well, I
What do
need to
you
just give you
see?
like a tiny bit of, because obviously I can't go into this completely innocent of past conceptions and so on. So I just want to give you like a tiny bit of history of my abridged but anyway existent relationship with Gauguin, which is we have
Yeah,
a significant collection of impressionist paintings here at the Hermitage in St. Petersburg.
right.
And impressionism tends to be like my favorite. I don't want to limit myself by saying that, but I love impressionism. So, and this particular wing of the Hermitage is more modern than the rest of the Hermitage. It's kind of like a separate building. It's always fairly empty, so you get to feast on these paintings. And actually, I just realized I've talked about it before because that's where they have the Kandinsky that we talked about
Right.
earlier. But anyway, so they do have a reasonably large collection of Gauguin, and I'll look this up later. But there was a Russian collector who was instrumental in establishing the major art gallery of Moscow, the Tretiakov Art Gallery, who purchased a lot of Gauguin, and obviously some of them have ended up, or I think maybe all of them have ended up in St. Petersburg. So I just would always see these, and I don't know how strong my emotional reaction was. I mean, I like the colors; those always spoke to me. But I think the thing
Yes.
that stood out the most is just like how different the subject matter itself was, right? From all the rest of like the painters who were focusing more on like urban scenes in Paris, or Monet's ponds focusing on Parisian or French rural scenes. So then you suddenly get a whole new palette introduced by Gauguin. You get all these semi-naked people, and so it always just seemed like, wow, like what's the biography behind this guy, and just the juxtaposition was always very alarming and noticeable. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. What about you? Have you seen Gauguin in person? His work?
Um, I realize I must have because there's a painting that we'll look at later, which is in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and I've been
Okay.
there,
Mm,
at least twice. So I've probably seen at least that, and surely I haven't been. I don't think I've been to the Boston Museum, but I know that there are other. Well, I don't know for sure, but there must be other Gauguins in the States that I've seen. Um, there's probably one or several in the Louvre, um, and other museums in Europe.
right.
I'm guessing I should have
Sure.
researched that, but yeah, I mean, um, I haven't seen this one, the one we're
Mm,
focusing on, but
mm.
I've seen some smaller ones. There might even be one in Houston.
I thought you were going to
I'll
say
have to look
Taipei.
that up. No, I doubt that.
Okay.
But
How is the arts
yeah.
collection? How is the best art museum in Taipei, by the way? Is it? I'm sure
Well,
you've
the
been.
best. Well, the best museum is the temple. The Palace Museum, which is mostly artwork from China. It's like all the stuff that Chiang Kai shek and his pirates stole when they fled the mainland and came here. And, a lot of that stuff is still hidden underground, and they like rotate the exhibitions. Like sometimes they'll put some stuff on display for a year and then they'll take it back underground. It's kind of a
Wow.
mysterious thing.
And what about Western art?
Um, Less so. I mean, I can't remember anything. Sometimes they'll have like traveling
Right.
exhibits, or they'll have like, you know, celebrations of Picasso or Warhol or something like that, but it's not original artwork necessarily. It's just like an exhibition with like, you know, chronologies and biographical details and videos and that kind of a multimedia
Right.
extravaganza. But
Okay.
I was hoping we could just let's
Sure.
just
Sure. Sure. Okay.
engage
Okay.
directly with the painting. Like you mentioned Gauguin's use of color, which
Yeah.
is probably, you know, my favorite thing about his work, just the wild, vibrant, vivid colors. Maybe that's not as prominent in this piece because I don't know, it's kind of dark, right? There's
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
yellows and oranges, but there's a lot of blue and dark and dark colors, brown, you know. There's a
Yeah.
lot of shadow. Um, how do we reconcile that with our preconceptions of Gauguin, or do we?
Well, I mean, you did just share the "be mysterious" quote, so perhaps like in that kind of twilight feeling that we get from this painting, there's kind of a sense of more like enchantment and yeah, you still have the exotic, but as you mentioned, it's everything's kind of clouded in shadow. I mean, it's not the middle of the day, right? It's a sense of reflection and the title again. Maybe you want to just repeat the title one more time.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
Yeah, so you could argue that just the title itself is already kind of heavy, right? We're
Mysterious.
asking these,
Yeah.
yeah, mysterious and heavy, and I'm spoiled a little bit though, Mark, because I've heard, I've listened to a couple interpretations on this painting, so now it's
That's
hard for me
okay.
to.
Well,
But
then you probably know that the title comes from this, you know, French, I want to say inscription. It's not an inscription. Legend in the upper left-hand corner, right? That's the English, it's the French version of the English translation, which we know the painting by. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? And then in the right corner, he's signed it. It you know,
yeah,
is where his signature appears, upper right hand corner. So
right,
those are the
right,
little yellow corners.
incursions, right,
Yeah. Whereas the rest is a blue dark background. So I don't know. I was gonna say, to me it's kind of Edenic. It's kind of a Garden of Eden with all these naked women, and
yeah,
you know, I've heard someone describe that central figure as being androgynous, but I've always thought, even though the breasts are not very prominent, I always thought of it as a feminine figure, especially because she seems to be reaching for an apple. It's almost like she's Eve, you know, in this. She's the Tahitian or Tahitian Eve, and you've got like a natural pre-lapsarian state with humans living peacefully with the animals. There are a lot of animals running around. Everyone's naked. No one's ashamed to eat from the tree of knowledge or the tree of good and evil, you know. And then the other prominent figure for me is that statue or idol, the blue
yeah.
idol in the on the left hand side. Um, some kind of Polynesian goddess, I guess. I don't know if she's been identified.
I mean, that's what one without much context or study, that would obviously be like what Gauguin would assume that we would assume.
Right.
Is that's like their local deity, and so...
Is that wrong, though?
Well, again, I would require more research, but I've heard that he did just kind of insert like Hindu gods that weren't necessarily local. So there may be some cross-pollination there in terms of how he's decided to depict the religious aspects.
He's being mysterious. That Gauguin.
Yeah.
With his mystery and his child brides. All right.
So can I say some more like corrupted things in the painting? I mean, when I say corrupted...
Anything you want. Yeah, please.
Okay, well, I'm just saying stuff that I've heard. And so in that sense, I can't come to it.
Okay, well, just so you know, the next slides are the description from the Museum of Fine Arts Boston catalog. So, do you want to say it before we look at it?
Yeah, I want to say it before. So, like,
okay,
at least there's some sense of rawness.
Right.
Well, there's this figure bottom left. I mean, you were kind of stressing the parasitic elements and sort
parasitic?
of paradisical.
Okay.
There's no parasitic. Yeah, is there? There's no word parasitic. No, yeah, I'm not going to be able to pull that one off, am I?
No, paradisial or paradisical. Paradisial
is what I ended up saying. Paradisical.
Yeah, I like it. I get it. I knew what you were going for.
Okay, but which word are we gonna? Paradisical. That's the main. Paradisiacal. Let me hear this.
Paradisiacal.
Wow. The British pronunciation that I'm hearing is paradisiacal. Paradisiacal.
I don't like that.
Doesn't sound paradisiacal enough.
What's the Yank pronunciation?
Unfortunately,
dead air.
Yeah, dead air. People here. Paradisiac. Well, that would be without the al at the end. Oh wait, here we go. Paradisiacal. Paradisiacal. Is that kind of what I said? Paradisiacal.
Not really, but I knew what you meant.
Paradisiacal. All right.
But anyway.
Paradisiacal.
So this figure in the lower
bottom
left, yeah.
we're seeing some. I'm thinking of the Blake here. You know, we're seeing some faces of woe. So that grandma does not seem as thrilled with life. Put it that way. And another reading that I heard is, if we link it more directly to the title, we've got like different stages of humanity's development, if you want to call it that, evolution, if you want to call it that. We've got the pre-civilized, those are the people with less clothes, and then you've got the kind of gradual transition to the more Christian-influenced clothed women. For example, the pair that are in the background, wearing kind of like the almost like the pinkish dresses. So I guess one question I'd have is like, do we see a clear positive connotation being represented for the less clothed people? I mean, because you would assume that Gauguin, was not super happy about the influence of Christianity, which was already there, the influence of capitalism and so on. Any thoughts on that?
Not that I see reflected in the painting necessarily, but I have to confess that I'm not able to see it that well on my screen. This is not the best way to view it. It looks like it's like the shadow
you
is
can
really
zoom, right?
I know, but I've got the slideshow going, so that's a big hassle. I could pull it up on my phone, but I don't want to do that right now. Um, I don't know. Maybe we can come back to that question as
Okay.
we focus on as we consider the description that we would see if we were actually in the Museum of Fine
Okay,
Arts
but you
Boston.
do see that there are these different stages of
Yes, yeah.
being clothed.
I don't know if they're linear, but I see what you mean. Yes, they're various states of undress.
And I think the apple is obviously crucial because we've got
Mm-hmm.
not only the apple figure that you mentioned central, which again, it could be a male as well, especially if you are then looking directly down and to the left, you see that girl also eating an apple. So I've heard that she's more the Eve figure, and that he could be
Okay.
Adam. But at the same time, I found your characterization compelling as well. So yeah, I would just again, I think that returns us back to this idea of like innocence and being spoilt by something. I mean, I think those questions are rather explicit in the painting.
Well, before we before we reveal what the catalog of the museum has to say about it, I wanted to ask: do you like when you go to a museum? Do you typically look at the textual information that's provided, um, or do you just allow yourself to be captivated and enthralled by the imagery, and you don't want to know what you don't want to know the you know details like historical or biographical or whatever?
Sure. No, I mean, I think there's both. I mean, I'm not someone who shies away from that. Like, I do want to have that initial visceral experience, but at the same time, like, I'm always keen to learn the title. I think often the title is quite telling as well, so it seems kind of strange to ignore it. And yeah, and I want to learn. So yeah, I would say in general, the more you know, the more you get out of it. I mean, when you have a good guide, for example, it can make all the difference.
But are we in the case of Gauguin, are we being untrue to the spirit of his work or his intention or whatever, right? Like it's kind of to be overly scholarly and
Sure,
concerned about dates and
sure,
biographical info. It's almost like missing the point in a way. But personally, I still want to know, and I cannot resist looking and reading about something
right.
that intrigues me. You know.
Yeah, and he doesn't exist in a vacuum, so I mean, it's good to know like where it's important to know, for example, that this is a French man's painting, not a Tahitian painting, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's quite significant. So, um, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of art they were creating at the time and how they would view this painting, for example. Again, none of that is to
Yeah.
discount his view or to label it like the colonizer or anything like that. I'm not keen to do that at all. But at least it's maybe important to remember that he's an outsider at the
But
minimum,
that
right?
is yes, oh for sure. But the colonizer role is relevant to the discussion because I was just thinking like
Sure.
what if we didn't know this was painted by a Frenchman and we saw it and we were told or we read that this painting was created in Tahiti in French
Right.
Polynesia. We
Right.
would immediately assume, oh, so that's what Polynesian art looks like. Like we would never give
Right.
native artists credit for individual vision. We would just think that every artist is like transmitting the culture, Whereas we would never say like a French painter, an individual French painter is transmitting French culture, Like these so-called
I don't know.
primitive or
I don't know.
non-Western. No, no, hold on. These primitive or
Sorry.
non-Western cultures, we we tend to think of, because we're unfamiliar with them, and so we just say, oh, that's like that primitive non-Western art. They're just painting what they see when they worship their gods that are also primitive. They worship stocks and stones.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would obviously be ridiculous, but at the same time, like, I was just gonna say, I mean, every painter hones their craft by working with the other
Tradition.
masters that surround them. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he's clearly, he worked as an impressionist, and he was trying to kind of burst out of that and do something new, and now he's associated with the symbolists, and who had an influence on Picasso and so on. So, especially when it comes to, like, I'd say the French salons of art. I mean, these connections are like really crucial. I mean, this impressionist is doing it the same way, but their dots are a little bit smaller. Like Pissarro, for example, he's like famous for his like really dot making technique, but it's still like linked to a relationship to how you depict light, for example, or not caring so much about being realistic. I mean, and it's also a response to what came before and so on. And like Gauguin is responding to the previous artistic traditions, and I don't know, take some of the romance out of it, but
the mention of Pissarro reminds me of the time I ruined my classmates' pointillist, not drawing. Well, it was a drawing, but he colored it as well. And so he said, I got to go do something over here. Just continue, with the little dots. And he gave me a marker, and like I pressed too hard, so like the dots were a lot bigger than the ones he had made these tiny little dots, but I didn't have control over the marker. And he came back. He's like, "What did you do?" I just continued doing what you
how
were
old
doing.
were
It's like,
you?
no, that was in middle school. We went.
If it was
We
like
went
community
through like
college, I think it would be worse.
Well, he was pretty upset, and when I thought about it, I couldn't blame him. But he asked me to do it. If you have the apprentice, if you trust the apprentice to do the work for you, you might not be pleased with
Exactly.
the result.
But were you officially part of his workshop, though?
No, I wasn't.
That's the problem.
I was unpaid, so that's what happens when you don't compensate your guild members.
Exactly.
All right, your journeyman, right?
So
Okay,
one more question: like, would you like to be? Maybe this is kind of a stupid question, but
I love
is this a
stupid
scene?
questions.
Okay, good. So is this a scene that appeals to you? Like, would you like to be in this painting?
Would I like to be in this scene? You mean in
Yeah,
this
would you like to be
Garden
there
of
with
Eden?
them?
Well, I'd.
Oh,
I
you're
mean,
calling it a
I'd
Garden of
love.
Eden.
I'd love to visit Polynesia. I mean, that's definitely on my list.
No, but this particular scene, like, do you want to be
Well,
there?
yeah, why not? Yes, have a picnic with those. With that group over there in the lower right corner. And that kind of reminds us of that Manet painting, Picnic on the Grass or whatever, or is it Monet? It's Manet, right? You know what I'm talking about. There's like
I think so. Yeah.
two guys and a naked naked lady.
Hmm.
You know what I'm talking about. That's Manet, right? But yeah, kind of that may be an allusion to this more intertextuality. But
Yeah,
sure, I
le
can.
déjeuner sur le herbe.
That's it. That's it. That's Manet, right? Not Monet.
Yes, it is. It's
All right, mayonnaise. So mayonnaise. So yeah, I can. Sure, I could quite enjoy, you know, joining that group and having some food outdoors, and you know maybe retiring with one or two of them behind the bushes. Did I say that
uh
out loud?
what so well I mean I asked that because my one and again, maybe we can talk about this later, but I don't necessarily know how comfortable I would be in that scene, you know? Like, I don't know, unless their
You could
vibe was just so chill and like loving that I could see that I didn't have any reason to feel inhibited. But otherwise, I think I would
you could
feel
you
out
could
of place.
you could wear a loincloth and
I
if
have
you're
no issues with that.
self-conscious. Oh, okay.
It's
You're a
more just
nudist. You're a
yeah,
nudist at heart.
yeah. It's more the issue is like, would I be on the same wavelength as these people, or would I feel very much like an outsider? I mean, obviously,
Well,
Gauguin.
you need to consume some ayahuasca or take some mushrooms or something. Then you'd feel right at home.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like Gauguin obviously had no issue, kind of, taking one of these or several of these women as brides and fully like immersing himself. Whereas I'm just wondering, I don't necessarily know that I don't have that same craving to be with a people who are of a vastly different culture.
Oh, you racist. I would definitely be open to that, but I would demand to see ID. Are you 18, young lady? Are you 21?
Okay, well, let me just tell you my little story. It's like when I was in Thailand once, with Sujang and Hangya, so it was Korea times, and we
Yep.
went to one of these like little islands that you can get to by
Yep.
boat, and it
Right.
was like I encountered the most quote unquote like non-Western society humans I'd ever met, like
Mm-hmm.
just like the local people. And I remember seeing people like sprawled out in the middle of the day, just like not giving a shit about anything, right? Because it's hot. And
Mm.
I was smoking a little woo woo at the time, and I was just like, I mean, you just suggested it as like a way of linking with the locals, but in that time, I was just the opposite. I was just like, wow, we are miles apart, and
Well, that's
I
because you were paranoid. You
forget
it
that
was
though. Forget
it was
that. I'm
weed
saying,
paranoia.
yeah, you could say that, but it wasn't said with disdain or with superiority, but like, you know, you just didn't feel. I just did not feel at all like
You felt like they are truly other.
very exactly. Yes, like they
Yeah.
just had not had the kind of, you know, our brains have been very specifically tuned by our exposure to whatever our society is,
I
a
mean,
bombardment of criticism.
they probably never even watched Seinfeld.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm sure by now smartphones are in all of their hands, but you know, my point is that I don't know how much fun we would have like chilling. Maybe we would have fun,
I
but
think it would be an
maybe not.
interesting experience. Did you hear
Interesting,
about that?
yes.
Did you hear about that social experiment? I don't know if it was intentional or what. I think it was in Polynesia, maybe. Like the local girls were healthy and big boned and voluptuous, but then like the local TV stations started
Ah, I know.
broadcasting.
Yeah, yeah. I know
They
what you're talking
started
about.
broadcasting episodes of Friends or whatever, and then all the girls develop complexes like, "Oh, I'm too fat. I don't look like Rachel and fucking
Exactly.
whatever. What are their names?
I don't
Rachel
know.
and
Rachel
Courtney
Maddow, I think,
Cox,
is the main character.
Rachel Maddow and Mika Brzezinski and Crystal Ball. No, Courtney Cox, Monica. How do I know this? See, we are corrupted. We know this shit.
I don't know, bro. I'm not.
Phoebes. All right. Anyway, um, we're we're off track here. Let's
No,
get
we're
some
not. We're
textual.
not. This is it's
Okay.
absolutely central because we're talking about this idea of like,
You're
you
right.
know, yeah. Go on.
But let's just get some textual input so we can move this
All right.
along. So this is, as I say, this is from the Boston, or the Museum of Fine Arts Boston catalog. It's on their website. You can view the painting, and then there's some close-ups. But this is the description. I'll read this one. You can read the next one. It says, in the winter of 1897, Gauguin experienced a psychological crisis. He had left France for Tahiti 6 years prior, hoping to discover an unspoiled tropical paradise. The adjective derived from that is
Paradisiacal.
there you go. In the French colony, where he could live affordably and advance his art. Instead, he was frustrated by the modernity he witnessed, quarreled with French colonial authorities, struggled financially, and endured a steep mental and physical decline. At a time of heightened personal hardship, Gauguin explored fundamental questions concerning the nature and meaning of life in this monumental painting, the largest he ever attempted, an ambitious effort in decorative mural painting, no doubt made with an eye to his artistic legacy. So, according to this, he knew it was his masterpiece, or it was supposed to be his masterpiece.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's
Near the
like one
end of
line that
life.
kind of that I was like, well, you would need evidence for that. I mean, if he said it, fair enough, but we should also like allow that maybe this was just inspiration that was very central to the moment, you know, like not
But
necessarily like ego driven.
the size is easily verifiable, right? It's the largest he ever attempted.
I just mean like thinking about his like post death legacy is a bit.
Yeah. Maybe there's
citation
no basis
needed.
for that.
Citation needed, bitch.
Well, ask those Bostonites. All right, your turn.
All right. In his letters, Gauguin described the composition proceeding from right to left, beginning with the sleeping infant and ending with the huddled figure of an old woman nearing death. Near center, an androgynous standing figure reaches for a piece of fruit. A blue idol with arms symmetrically outstretched atop a pedestal, Gauguin suggested indicates the beyond. While not planned for integration with a specific architectural setting, Gauguin did intend this decorative painting to look like a mural, requesting it be exhibited in a simple white frame. The painting's yellow corners, one bearing an inscription, now the work's title, in French, and the other his signature, Gauguin felt made the painting appear like a fresco whose corners are spoiled with age and which is attached to a golden wall.
They did call that an inscription. All right, so yeah, it's made to look like a mural. They described it as a mural in the previous section, but it's not. It's a oil painting, but the way it's displayed makes it look like a mural and even a fresco. Okay, let's look. This is the last bit. His smooth paint application and choice of a coarse and heavy burlap support further emphasize the painting's fresco-like effect. Despite his descriptions of it, the painting resists easy interpretation and singular narrative, something critics observed when it first went on view in Paris in 1898 at Ambroise Voir's gallery alongside a suite of related paintings. Tade Natanson noted that the painting, though obscure and difficult to grasp, invites us to meditate upon the mystery of our destiny. Be mysterious. Scholars have since put forth numerous literary sources that could have conceivably served as inspiration for the work. The questions posed in the title, and indeed in the painting itself, are perennial concerns about the human condition that continue to resonate with viewers today. Origins, identity, purpose, and destiny.
Nice.
That's pretty grandiose.
Yeah.
So did you think about that when you first saw it, that the narrative moves from right to left?
No. And now I'm tempted to kind of go back and look at it again.
Well, we don't have time for that. What about the idol as the, what did we say, the great beyond, indicates the beyond with a capital B, biatch.
I'm just looking at it again in the light of this reading. So again, where's the section about right to left?
You mean in the slides?
Yeah.
Let me go back to that.
Here,
yeah,
okay.
here.
Sleeping infants and editing, Sure.
I mean, like the middle.
Gauguin's letters.
Allegedly, according to the Boston Museum. I mean, the central figure grabbing for the fruit is like, middle-aged maybe, or slightly younger. So maybe that narrative works like chronologically from right to left, which again, maybe the reason the breasts are not prominent is because she's prepubescent, which makes it a little bit creepy, but not, it is believable. Although there are some older women in like the lower right-hand corner and so on. I don't know how much credence we should give to this. Now I kind of regret,
I mean, if it does come from Gauguin, it's like, fair enough. I mean, it's... Yeah.
Yeah. Could be, but his intentions may have not been fully realized, but okay.
I mean, the dog in the far right is facing left, and then this kind of like bird that's... Do you see the bird?
I need to go back to the painting. There we go. Yeah.
And so the bird is also facing that same direction, and then this other like goat is also facing the same direction. So in a way, it's like yeah. So in a way, it's pushing you that way. You could argue.
But see, I feel like the right side is much. It's brighter. Like those yellow bodies are more prominent. So it's like I feel drawn to the right half of the canvas, I guess. But maybe that's also to indicate like the split, right? Like the central figure splits this in two, and you kind of go to the dark side. It's almost like morning to evening, moving from right to left. I don't know. We're probably reading too much into it.
Not at all. I mean, I think, again, the argument that I saw put out there was, that he wants to show maybe more positive connotations for the pre-civilized. And again, I'm going to just stop saying air quotes, but the listener can assume that I'm air quoting that. But at the same time, like, you do have the clothed people on the right, so it's not like they're gradually becoming clothed from right to left.
Exactly. That's why I have trouble with, I mean, again, it's not either or, it's both and. You can see a narrative line from right to left, but it's not like exclusively that,
And I mean, I guess maybe it's just worth noting that he is trying to show like the cycle of life. Maybe that's just as interesting or noteworthy.
So anything more on the blue idol? You say maybe that's a Hindu goddess or god?
Yeah, I just remember hearing that he'd sort of like hijacked, and I've seen that portrayed kind of in a critical light, that, that's kind of like down to his desire to maybe impose what he wanted on this culture rather than what it actually had. But anyway,
well, that's interesting. Makes it more mysterious to me. It's almost like he just inserted a UFO into
Right.
the painting, you know, or like I don't know, something completely incongruous, which makes it more striking. All right, let's carry on. This is from Wackipedia. I'll let you read it because it's a little bit small on my screen.
Okay. Looking for a society more simple and elemental than that of his native France, Gauguin left for Tahiti in 1891. In addition to several other paintings that express his highly individualistic mythology, he completed this painting in 1897. During the process of creating this painting, Gauguin experienced several difficult events in his personal life. He suffered from medical conditions including eczema, I know what that's like, syphilis, I don't know what that's like, and conjunctivitis.
Conjunctivitis.
Is that with the eye?
Pink eye. It's pink eye.
Okay, so I know what that's like.
Yep.
He faced financial challenges. I don't really know what that's like. Swag, you know. And going into debt. Okay, I'll stop this. He was also informed about the death of his daughter from Copenhagen. From one of many letters to his friend, Daniel de Montfort, Gauguin disclosed his plan to commit suicide in December of 1897.
I didn't know that.
However, I don't know what that's now. Okay. However, he wanted to paint a large canvas that would be known, okay, so fair enough maybe, as the grand culmination of his thoughts. Following the completion of Where Do We Come From? Where Are we Going? Gauguin made a suicide attempt with arsenic. And I remember
I didn't know that.
And then he failed, so he went on for a couple more years and suffered.
That's probably in The Moon and Sixpence, and I forgot. But oh, look at that stupid footnote. I should have deleted that when I copy pasted, but I didn't.
Shocking.
So you know it's legit. It's straight from Wackipedia, straight from the CIA to you.
What is Wackipedia?
Wikipedia.
Oh, I thought it was like an alternate source. Okay. By the way,
Wikipedia is good on, you know, this kind of stuff, right? Just don't go to it for any contemporary political information because it's all bullshit.
I would love to. If I was rich, I would give money to Wikipedia. Like whenever they do those drives, I always feel a tinge of guilt because I love Wikipedia.
Oh, you're paying for it with your tax dollars because that's CIA infested. So don't worry.
Okay, fair enough. My tax dollars, which I don't pay in the U.S. Yeah. But anyway, no, I was just gonna say really.
You always pay in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of W, did you see that Whitney Webb was on Brianna Lewis? What is her name? Brianna Lewis Gray?
Brianna Joy Gray?
Brianna Joy Gray, yes.
No, I'll have to watch that. I always watch Whitney Webb.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Gotta see my girl. I just finished, I probably mentioned this. I finished volume 2 of her One Nation Under Blackmail. So I'm ready to interview her. I'm going to try to get her on.
It's an interesting conversation too because
Books Are Burning.
Brianna, I feel like, has been gradually going further and further left. And she is quite open about the fact in this interview with Whitney that she's like, hey, I'm kind of in uncharted territory right now. She's almost like nervous to talk to her because she said like the stuff that you research and study is not my personal area of expertise. So she was very much more like teach me rather than like I think in general she likes to really kind of challenge her guests and not in a hostile way, but you know, in a desire to play devil's advocate. But she couldn't.
Well, except when really it's Matt Taibbi.
Did they go at it?
Yeah,
vaguely,
pretty much. Yeah. She's like, why didn't you look to see if Bernie supporters were suppressed by Twitter or X or Twitter? I love Brianna. Like,
yeah, me too.
Regardless, but I'll have to watch that. All right.
Okay.
So that's what Wackipedia has to say. I'd forgotten or I didn't know that he attempted suicide with arsenic. That's pretty heavy, man.
So how do you attempt suicide with arsenic? It's a
Well,
powder
it's
or what?
poison. No. It's well, I think it's a liquid. It's poison. You drink it. You quaff it,
Okay.
and I don't know why it didn't work. I guess he didn't take enough, or he was half-assed about it. Fucking
Maybe he
pussy.
queefed it out.
He quaffed it, then queefed it. Um,
Exactly.
I don't know what the basis of this is. Maybe that little footnote I copy pasted would explain. But he wanted to. What did it say? Oh, well, this is about his plan to commit suicide. But before he died, he wanted to paint a large canvas that would be known as the grand culmination of his thoughts. So if that's true, I mean, it's certainly an important piece in his oeuvre, right?
I just tried Googling how do you kill yourself with arsenic, and like the first search result was like the Russian suicide hotline. It's just interesting, like, right? They won't let me like get that info. Instead, I'm just like, anyways, sorry. Go on.
Yeah. It should have a big Mr. Yuck sticker on it. Remember Mr. Yuck?
No.
That may have been before your time. It was like a green, ugly face. Like, it was supposed to prevent kids from drinking poisonous stuff in the kitchen.
Okay.
That was back in the 70s, before your time. Maybe Mr. Yuck was phased out by the 80s. All right, I don't know what the fuck we're talking about now. Mr. Yuck. Yeah, let's carry on. So, yeah, we saw earlier where French Polynesia was located, and Tahiti, which is where he was when he painted this, is part of the archipelago called the Society Islands. I don't know if this can you see that pretty well on your
Yeah.
screen? Bora Bora is there. I first heard about that in an episode of Cheers. Norm wanted to move to Bora Bora and live in a hut. Of course he didn't. He stayed right there in Boston, drinking beer with Cliff and the others. Did you ever watch Cheers?
No.
Oh God, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But look at that, man. Everything comes back to everything else. Boston. That's where this painting is. Maybe he got inspired to go to Bora Bora because he saw where do we come from, what are we, where are we going in the Boston Museum, although probably not. But look at the shape. This is Tahiti from space. It's actually like, it looks like two islands, but they're connected, so I guess it's one. It looks kind of like a tennis racket or a ping pong paddle. All right, whatever. Somewhere on that island, he was banging underage girls and painting. Oh, it's the original Epstein Island. This is getting creepy.
Did they do a lot of painting on Epstein's Island?
Creepier. Well, he supposedly was interested in science, right? That's why he invited all those guys like Lawrence. What the fuck is his name? Lawrence
Olivier.
No, come on. He's one of those intellectual dark web guys, Lawrence something. I don't know.
Bro.
I don't care.
I'm not enough of a Joe Rogan bro to know the answer.
Well, he was actually at that Santa Fe Institute where Cormac McCarthy was, I think. So that's kind of disturbing. Allegedly. All right, moving on. So here we come to the question of cancellation. I found this on the National Gallery of Australia website. It's called the Gauguin Dilemma. There was like a series of podcasts. Can you read the description at the bottom? It's really small for me.
Sure.
Can you see that?
I can, yeah. I just have very good eyes.
You sure do.
Paul Gauguin changed the course of art history, but to many, he's a monster.
Ah!
The modern master, accused of taking child brides in Tahiti, is long dead, but his legacy in the Pacific is well and truly alive. hosted by award-winning Samoan Australian journalist Josefina Fuamoli. This 4-part podcast series explores the social, political, and art historical themes surrounding Paul Gauguin, asking, can you love the art, but loathe the artist?
Interesting question, which we'll come back to. And then it said 4 episodes. I just snipped the first 2. Can you read the description of episode 1? This looks pretty interesting.
Episode 1, Drawing the Line. Paul Gauguin broke the rules about color and line, but the details of his personal life are deeply controversial. By today's standards, Gauguin's relationships with his Polynesian muses would be criminal. But is it fair to judge history by today's standards? Or should we judge him by the mark he left on the islands he visited?
And episode 2, this is interesting as well, though not related in the same way.
Episode 2, The Art of the Deal. Very appropriate. Gauguin's When Will You Marry is one of the most expensive paintings ever sold, but the artist died poor and alone. Who were the men pulling the strings? What is the price of fame? In this episode, we follow the money.
Sounds pretty good. I listened to the
Webbian.
Yeah. I listened to the trailer and it described him as a pedophile. Like that was the actual word used by one of the critics, who at the same time did not dismiss his work. I mean, I like the approach they're taking in this, right? Like they're not saying, "Oh, cancel him. Don't look at it." They're saying, "Hey, it's complex. Is it possible to admire the art and loathe the artist?" as they
But why
put
do you?
it.
I don't know. It's like, yeah, I'm just at the point now where I don't even want to loathe the artist. Like I'm not into. Why should I have to loathe him? I can even if he does, he can do stuff that I find, immoral or distasteful, but still,
right.
it doesn't mean he's not a human being trying his best every day. I mean, fuck me. I don't know, I'm so over the I'm better than you idea.
Judge not, lest ye be judged.
Exactly. And I mean, it's not like he said the easiest life, He said some shit to deal with. So.
Well, in light of that, let's consider this quote from Philip Roth, the great Philip Roth. I think I've alluded to this before, but he told the Paris Review when he was interviewed, literature, and we could say art, because remember, Pessoa teaches us that all art is literature. Literature isn't a moral beauty contest. Its power arises from the authority and audacity with which the impersonation is pulled off. The belief it inspires is what counts. I approve this message.
I don't know about why the word impersonation.
Well, in literary terms, it's like, do you buy into the characters of a novel, for example?
I guess, but I just feel like there's some negative connotations. There's the strong emphasis on kind of artifice, as well as the expression pulled off. I'm not really, I don't know, I feel like these are caveats.
You don't like to pull off? All right, forget the second part. Let's just focus on literature isn't a moral beauty contest. That's really the important part. Fuck the rest of it. Shut the hell up, Philip Roth. Who are you to elaborate on that? You said it perfectly. Literature isn't a moral beauty contest, and we can apply that to all art. Why do you have to muddy the waters with this talk of authority? I do like audacity, though, so I'm going to give him credit for that. All right.
I would even say, pulled off, okay. Its power arises from the authority and audacity with which it is pulled off. The only thing I really objected to is impersonation and then paired with pulled off.
Okay. All right. So let's cut that. Now we have a perfect quote.
Yeah.
How about the belief it inspires is what counts? We don't need belief, do we? We need feeling or like something
Yeah, we don't need inspiration.
experience. Well, inspiration's good, but anyway, let's
It's
not
good,
quibble.
but it's not okay.
Yeah. You let us down, Phil. But that first line
at
is
some point,
priceless.
I don't know how much. You let me know when we're gonna really try to interrogate this primitive savage thing, or like interrogate Gauguin's biography, because I'm being quite gentle to him now, but I want to see if he can survive my best attempt at skewering him. You know,
Okay,
like
do that
I will
now.
try to
Now's a
turn
good
on.
time
Okay,
for that.
all right. So I'll try to turn on my most self-righteous persona.
That's my
And
favorite persona of yours.
I know you like that one. Yeah,
You do that one. You do that one very well.
thank
Let's
you.
have it.
Okay, so
The Puritan Catholic. Here he
exactly.
comes. Let's go.
Well,
And I'm the Catholic Puritan.
No, but can you help me though? Like, let's both try and like.
Yeah, man. Let's kick the shit out of him.
Let's try. Let's
do it.
All right. So.
Fuck Gauguin. Here we go.
No. Okay. So yeah. So. I guess you have to think about. Yeah, the people in his life and how his effect on them. So. You could argue that, and I think Liliana is always quick to kind of show the mother's perspective. So, for example, when we were talking about Into the Wilds, she like wasn't having it with Chris McCandless. Like, she was all about. For her, the thing that stands out is like how he was kind of a dick for not contacting his mom, right? Like for not letting her know that he was okay and stuff. So that's interesting, and like I don't discount that. And we were watching one documentary about Gauguin. And yeah, she was like 5 kids, you know? And so yeah, so he left his 5 kids, which yeah, I don't think that's a great look. And then he didn't really support them financially. And then I don't exactly know what happened in Tahiti, but he had several different women, right? And he fathered kids with different women.
Oh, he did.
I think
I didn't know about that.
We have to check all that, but
let's assume he did.
Let's assume he did. Guilty until proven innocent, bitch.
So that means there's some Gauguin descendants running around Polynesia now.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, so okay, so like I'd rather look at it less maybe from a fidelity perspective and more just like, well, first, are you taking were you a positive? I mean, I liked the way I think that the previous slide that was from the podcast said, like, what was his overall like impact on the island? Like, did he contribute to these people's lives, or was he more of like a wrecking ball? And how did he use his whiteness? Like, was it something that the women were getting with him because of some kind of false promises of like, I don't know, like what was his appeal, and was he exploiting them, or was it like were they enjoying their relationship? So that would be the stuff that would be crucial for me, is just like how he approached his personal relationships, and were they of like a mutually beneficial nature, right? I think that would be important to ask. So anything you want to add?
I mean, that is the question, right? Like, what are those details? I don't know, even though I read that novel. I don't remember there being much about it, and of course that's fiction anyway, so like what really happened? Was he like raping was he raping underage girls, or I don't know. I don't know. Like, what's the source
And how much of it is
any of that?
compulsion? How much of it? I mean, you could argue that everything we do is like, compulsion, right? So it's like he didn't have it. So unless he was very like maliciously making decisions to like say, like, haha, I don't know. I'm a determinist, so that makes questions of morality really tricky, You get me, right? Like, if you don't have free
believe in
choice,
free will?
no, and we've been over this before, and blah blah blah. But I don't want to do it right now. But so as a
We have?
determinist, yes, 100%, 100%.
Oh, I don't remember. Is that
okay,
my
well,
choice not to remember?
Yeah, so that obviously like kills any real like conversation about morality. But the other thing would just be, I would assume that all his
So like
actions.
hold on. So like
Okay.
the genocide in Palestine, that's just destiny, man. Like they can't help it. They can't help
Well, it's
themselves.
cause
They
and
have no
effect.
choice.
It's cause and effect. Yeah, it's cause and effect. I mean, that's why we always have to realize we're no better than anybody else. Like we are all just products of our
Yes,
conditions.
we did have this conversation. I said, "No, sorry.
Yeah. I remember.
I'm
I think
not a
was it on
I'm not
the
a I'm
UN?
not a war criminal yeah, maybe it
Exactly.
was the UN episode. I'm not a war
Anyway, but
criminal.
the other thing I would just say is like
I
in
may
my
be a piece of shit, but I'm not a war criminal."
okay. So just the final thing is, I would assume that his need to kind of pursue art over relationships, let's focus on that aspect, for example, I just would assume that was just like something he had to do. Like you don't get the genius without the nastiness. You don't get the Michael Jackson without the nastiness. So yeah, I just kind of feel like take the good with the bad. I don't know, that's my surface commentary. Do you want
Well, I
to?
don't think we can. Well, I don't think we can. Rule definitively on that because we're ignorant. We don't know the facts, right? And then also, as I think one of those podcasters hinted at, like, what about the different historical context, right? Like, do you dismiss all of Greek philosophy because uh, a lot of the Greek thinkers, I mean, really, all of Greek, not only the philosophers, but like tragedians and, you know, pretty much every cultural figure you admire uh, was probably a pederast, you know,
Yeah,
engaged
I mean,
in,
so
right.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the
So,
culture of the time. So
and I guess
what do
we
you
would
do
have to
with
have a
that?
conversation with Gauguin about how exactly he was perceiving this culture, and like, does it sound smart or not? Basically, like, is his view of them like reductive? Like, would we find it intellectually satisfying? Like, would he be like, no, I like this culture because of blah blah blah, and we'd be like, yeah, that makes sense, or would it be like these wild beasts, and then we would look at them and we'd be like, they're clearly not, like they're clearly dignified people, and but I don't think he wouldn't have gone there to live if he really, if he really felt so, if he felt cynical about them, right? So they were obviously like, it's better to be idolized, I guess I'm saying, than even, what I'm saying, it's better to be idolized even if it's like reductive. It's better to be reductive idolized than reductive like dismissed in a negative way. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Well, like if you're looking at like a Native American population or Native American people, and you're saying like, oh, these people are so
Noble
like great,
savages.
yeah, noble savage, that would still
Right.
be preferable to,
Ah, yes,
oh,
I
these
see what you
people
mean.
are, we should exterminate
Just
them because
just
they're
savages,
dumb.
right. Merciless Indian savages, as the Declaration of Independence describes them. Yeah, noble savage would be better than that. I
Yeah, I
see
mean,
what you mean.
and the ideal would be neither, right? Because both are an
Reductive.
illusion. Yeah,
Yeah.
reductive. But I would want to have that conversation with him and just see,
Yeah.
yeah. But again, he was essentially celebrating them. So
That's
an
hard to
interesting thing too,
argue.
you know?
That's hard to argue. Like, is he? I mean, he clearly finds much to admire in, I don't know, the people, their culture, certainly the landscape and the natural beauty.
Exactly. Like, how do you accuse him of being like the colonizer when he's the one who wanted to go there and live? I don't know. You know, it's like weird to like he has more of a natural desire to be with the other, and then what? The other people who are like comfortable in their own like French society, they're the more like progressive people. You know, that seems.
Well, you sound like someone who's not aware of his white privilege.
Well, he may have been using that as well, but anyway. Yeah, we have to see how he ran his household in Tahiti. Was he running it like, what's his name in Heart of Darkness? Kurtz?
Well, Kurtz.
Is it Kurtz?
Well, okay, so let's say we found out. Then what? We can't look at his paintings if we don't like what we learn, you know?
No, we can, of course. Yeah,
exactly.
We can, yeah. Yeah.
So, literature isn't a moral beauty contest. I still accept that. I mean, look, can we read to take the most extreme example, can we read the works of the Marquis de Sade? I say yay, you know, not nay. Of course we can. Does that mean we approve of the man and everything he did? No. Does that mean we are not horrified by what he wrote even? No, we can be, but there's still something to learn from it. There's still something he's showing us and teaching us about ourselves, however unpleasant it may be.
Yeah.
Hold that mirror up to nature or up to man.
And at the same time, what do you think about it if people just stop enjoying something? I mean, they have that right as well, right? Like,
oh, absolutely. Like people who admired Kevin Spacey and were big fans of House of Cards, and then all that weird shit came out about him, and they're like, and they, you know, cut his role. I mean, I thought that show was terrible to begin with. It's like normalizing corruption. It's like, oh, this is how it is, but it's kind of funny and interesting too. No, I thought it was disgusting.
Yeah, I think it so much depends on there's a lot to this conversation. Like, it depends on the kind of art you're creating, like how much the art that you're creating is supposed to be like a reflection of your persona or your moral view. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're writing a book about how to be a good person and you're being a really cruel person, that's different than if you're creating something that's more just about like the aesthetic.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah, I'm thinking about like the Book of Virtues by William Bennett, the former drug czar. You know, and then he promotes all these moral values, and then it finds out like he's an inveterate gambler, and then he's confronted with it. He's like, well, I didn't gamble with the milk money. I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, you fucking hypocrite, denouncing other people, and you're like, you know.
Or I don't know, it's just like, for me, I'm thinking about Puff Daddy right now, you know, because I really loved a lot of the music that he's associated with. But if I see him as more of like a predatorial character, even like something as simple as like, let's say I'm listening to a song with Puff Daddy and Mace, and like, you know Mace, right?
No.
Okay, Mace was like another rapper that he helped like boost his career. But like Mace, when
with
Mace
baby
talks
oil.
about yeah, so when Mace talks about the relationship now, he's like very critical about how Puff treated him and how exploitative. So it's like when I hear a song with the two of them like going back and forth, it's hard to feel the same kind of like lightness and joy about these two guys when
Sure, right.
So I don't know. It really just depends.
well, I know what I was going to say. Like, we're assuming that an art celebrity of the late 19th century is the same as a, pop star of today. That is absolutely not the case. This guy was sick, he was dying, he was living in abject poverty, whatever his privileged position may have been getting there, in the first place, and having certain advantages due to his French citizenship and so on. He's still like suffering for his art in a
For
way
sure.
that fucking Puff Daddy
No, but here I'm
didn't.
ready to take Puffs back here again and just say that I think it's hard to deny that the type of kind of like ambition that Puff Daddy had at the beginning of his career, like the kind of maybe a bit of an like obsessed maniac in certain ways, is also like what gave him the drive to produce good music, and like
But don't
high.
you think also that the whole thing was a kind of psyop, like he had backing from powerful elites who wanted him to do what he was doing?
I don't know. I'm just saying that like often genius comes with asshole. Not always, but often.
Yeah.
Extreme personalities
Mm-hmm.
are often really good at making certain shit.
Okay, we can leave it at that. Quickly, let's talk about the relationship of Gauguin and Van Gogh, because I don't know, when I think of the one, I think of the other sometimes. Like before he went to Tahiti, he stopped in at Van Gogh's house in France. So in this slide, we see a painting by Gauguin of Van Gogh painting. What? What is he painting?
Sunflowers.
Yeah, we did an episode on that in
Yes,
season
sir.
2. And then we also have a portrait of Gauguin called Man in a Red Beret that was painted by Van Gogh. So they worked and lived together for a while here in what's called the Yellow House. This was Van Gogh's house, and again, this is from Wikipedia. You want to read that for us, please?
Sure. The Yellow House. The house was the right wing of 2 Place Lamartine, Arles, France, where on May the
Oh,
1st, 1888, Van Gogh rented 4 rooms. He occupied 2 large ones on the ground floor to serve as an atelier and kitchen, and on the first floor, 2 smaller ones facing Place Lamartine. The window on the first floor, nearest the corner with both shutters open, is that of Van Gogh's guest room, where Paul Gauguin lived for 9 weeks from late October 1888.
so that's the important part. It wasn't that long. I thought they were together a couple years, but
Well, you know what
it's
I heard
more like
is
a
that
couple months.
Van Gogh
Yeah.
had this dream of starting a commune, and he wanted Gauguin to be like the sort of head figure at this
Okay.
commune.
Hmm.
And Gauguin like declined, and that's what sent Van Gogh into the rage, which ultimately caused the snip snip.
Hmm.
So
Not of his foreskin, but of his ear.
no, right.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe. I'm gonna have to go back and read The Moon and Sixpence. Maybe that's in there. Um.
You can also
Yeah.
watch the film which
Interesting.
I just downloaded, which I haven't watched yet, but
Hmm.
Voyage to Tahiti.
Oh.
It looks
Maybe I should.
interesting.
When was
Yeah.
that made?
2017.
Oh my goodness. Yes. If you could share that in the drive, I will watch it.
And apparently some of the critics are like a lot of the criticism of the film is that it doesn't like it's not critical enough of Gauguin. So, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. All right. The Yellow House. So we're nearing the end of this episode, season 3, episode 18. The next text. That's my call. I'm going to say that it will probably be a lecture by Michael Parenti. Do you know him?
Mm-mm.
Brilliant. Do you know Christian Parenti, his son? You've probably seen
No.
him. Okay. I thought maybe you'd seen him on Jimmy Dore, or he's probably been on System Update with Glenn Greenwald. Maybe not. He makes the rounds. He's probably been on Chris Hedges. Anyway, that's the
Okay.
son. His father, Michael Parenti, brilliant. He's got a lecture called Gangster Capitalism and the State, something like that. About an hour long. I think that I've been wanting to discuss that with you for some time, so that might be a good episode 19, which is the next to last episode of this season and this year, and then you can bring us home with EP 20.
Oh shit.
But more on that later. I'll make the final call soon. So, yes, dear listeners, viewers, please subscribe to our Substacks. I'm at Mark Will Write, WRITE.substack.com. My co-host is Tomek B.substack.com. If you're watching on YouTube, this is the channel known as at Mark Will Write, WRITE.
Make sure you
And
slap a
that
like.
does it. Yeah. Smash that like button. Murder that like button, as Garland
Yeah.
Nixon says.
Assassinate it.
Assassinate it. Rape it. Kill it. Destroy it.
No, don't do that. No, do not do
Sodomize it. No,
that.
don't
No,
do
do
that.
not do that.
Just
Okay.
kill it. No violence, no sex. Lightly tap the like button with all the
Do not get
gentleness.
aroused. And do not get
And
aroused.
don't get aroused. With all the gentleness your soul can muster. Don't give in to the temptations of the flesh. Be a man of spirit. Be mysterious.
Amen.
And on that note, we will sign off. Until next time, I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I am Maui Lives Matter in Tahiti.